Good evening, everyone, and thanks once again for joining us for this Sunday's edition of Alaska Weather. I'm meteorologist Dave Percy. First graphic again, the hazardous weather, and still a wind advisory out here for the Kobuk Valley, and specifically from Ambler north, or areas north of Ambler. And same as yesterday, continued windy conditions with gusts 40-50 miles an hour. And that advisory is due to last until 6 a.m. Monday morning, or they'll, kick it out longer like they did today. Otherwise, remainder of the state, there are no watches, warnings, or advisories anywhere here. Southern Alaska looking good. Panhandle, out west, Bering Sea, nothing that hits the advisory level. So moving on to fire danger chart here. No significant fire danger that I could find, and that's good news. So moving on to satellite imagery, you can see a batch of clouds here was approaching the coastline here, the Panhandle, starting to pull back to the northwest a little, but still moisture across the area there brought periods of light rain with showers, more showery up here to the north over toward Yakutat, where they only had 1/100 of an inch there, 300s at Juneau. And otherwise, amounts ranged from anywhere from 1/10 to 1/3 of an inch, with places like Annette and, Petersburg picking up 1/3 of an inch, but Craig had about 1/2 an inch of rain today, 12 hours ending at 3 p.m. Otherwise, some clouds in across the southeast interior, on down into the Kenai Peninsula, and really no precipitation to speak of with those that's worth mentioning. And some breaks here north of the Alaska Range, Tanana Valley, greater Fairbanks area, temperatures rising into the 50s there this afternoon. Cooler conditions back to the west, and cloudy skies embedded in this cloud mass here. A narrow band of light snow showers mixing with rain, and then mostly rain showers you get down into Bristol Bay. Again, amounts quite light. And really nothing at a few showers at Kodiak State Airport earlier today. They had a few showers around with this moisture farther to the southwest. Otherwise, out in the Bering Sea, we've got northerly winds still quite brisk, about 50 miles an hour, 45 miles an hour at Gamble out of the north. Temperature, same time, 18 degrees. So it still feels a little like winter up there. And back into the Brevig Mission area, gusts 35 miles an hour. So still windy through the Bering Strait, St. Lawrence Island, and Point Hope had a peak gust of 56 miles per hour. And then again, windy conditions into the Kobuk Valley, but lighter up along the Arctic coast. Fog on the eastern side with a few flurries added in as you get over toward Kaktovik. Otherwise, that's about it weather-wise up in that area. And the Aleutians here, system just grazing the Adak-Atka area, possibly with a little bit of very light moisture, isolated snow showers for Shimia. Otherwise, really nothing going on out here over the Bering Sea, and this is quite a weak system here just south of the Aleutians. Then you start picking up some breaks in the sky here over the Alaska Peninsula, and then just a stray shower or two as you go up to the Aleutian Range. Again, Kodiak, a few isolated showers, and then that narrow band of light scattered precipitation here along this trough. And amounts in through here, I think Sleet Mute had close to 1/10 of an inch, water equivalent. Otherwise, everywhere else had either nothing or just a few 100ths of an inch. And along the southeast coast, this trough responsible for the areas of rain and clouds you had today. Another front here just to the west, and isolated showers sneaking up into the Wrangell Mountains with the eastern Copper River Basin. But again, amounts are quite light, generally variably cloudy through this area down into Cook Inlet. And again, some sunshine, and those mild temperatures up there in the mid-Tanana Valley, and looks like some clearing also. Well, there was clearing, there was some sunshine, Arctic Village, and on down toward Eagle in some areas. Moving on to the forecast for tonight, looking like this. That front edges into the southeast coast, so that's going to bring another round of precipitation that you may have trouble noticing an end to today's, and then when this starts, there'll probably be a short break in there. Although down to the south will be a little more showery, and this precipitation will extend back to the west. Rainfall, Cordova, Kenai Peninsula late tonight, southern Kenai Peninsula, and possibly spreading into western Prince William Sound. A little iffy at this point, but it could happen, and then maybe a chance of showers for Kodiak. And this persistent trough out here keeps a chance of isolated rain or snow showers in over the Aleutian Range, maybe Kamishak Bay into northern Bristol Bay, and then some isolated stuff up to the north here along that trough. Still quite windy up over the northwest, again with the wind advisory in the Kobuk Valley through tonight, and the passes of the western Brooks Range into the Long Mountains, quite windy, but that's not the case. Really no change up here along the Arctic coast, patchy areas of fog, flurries on the east side, and same conditions you've seen for a while up there. Light winds over the Bering Sea, but so really lightening up here, so that area of clearing will maybe start filling in here a little bit, but still should be mostly clear. But watch for the low clouds and fog. They can form at any moment out in that area, and still flurries and maybe a little less windy for St. Lawrence Island here through the Bering Strait. This system looks like it pushes a little more moisture up into the, definitely for the Adak-Atka area, increases the chances toward the areas of, well, Unmak Island specifically tonight as that front pushes eastward. The low really not pushing any direction too rapidly. Otherwise, the Bering Sea, light winds and mostly dry conditions with lots of marginal VFR. And for the Monday forecast, it's going to be a rainy day on a Monday from the eastern Aleutians up the Alaska Peninsula here. Showers Kodiak after some rain early in the day. And rain chances here with that dissipated front along the North Gulf Coast into the Panhandle. Lighter, more showery conditions down to the south. A little more persistent up to the north, especially Sitka, Elfin Cove to Yakutat. And I wouldn't expect this precipitation to get too far inland here. So Copper River Basin will basically be dry tomorrow with clearing again over the central interior from the upper Tanana Valley 40-mile country now right up into the northwest interior there into Attack Valley on out to Kivalina, Point Hope. Still windy, but maybe not quite as windy. Again, the wind advisory ends here for the Kobuk Valley. Looks like a sure thing. After tonight, it'll be over early tomorrow, and chance of light snow there from the Brooks Range, maybe Anatuvik Pass northward on up to Kaktovik Barter Island. Flurries Bering Strait to St. Lawrence Island, a lot lighter on the winds though through the strait and for the island there, and really not much change here for the Bering Sea. Mostly cloudy, mostly marginal, isolated showers. This week front staying to the south at least through tomorrow, and then for Tuesday, it continues to slide eastward here, and so the rain shield stays down to the south. Wind shield not really making having much of an effect here, although maybe a little bit of an increase in the east-southeast winds for the eastern Aleutians, but not too bad. A couple of weak trough spread shower chances into the Pribilofs, and the southwest coast there, light wind, patchy areas, low clouds and fog, otherwise dry. A weak low near St. Lawrence Island, maybe some light moisture up here with that feature. And then the Brooks Range, tell gradient continuing to weaken up here on the west side, so even you're losing the winds there. In fact, it should be quite light wind day there for Kotzebue Sound on up to Point Hope, and mostly sunny. Central eastern interior, a couple sunny days coming up for the Fairbanks area on over to North Pole. And possibly in the Copper River Basin, partly mostly cloudy, isolated showers over the mountains, and that's it. And chance of rain again, North Gulf Coast and another front pushing more precipitation into the Panhandle, but nothing heavy, and the winds definitely under gale force. Looking at the low temperature for tonight down across the Panhandle, mid-30s to lower 40s, about sums it up. Mid to upper 30s for the coastal areas of the North Gulf Coast, upper 20s to lower 30s, south central Alaska, Susitna Valley, upper 30s Kodiak. Teens, mid-teens there at Tanana, otherwise 25 to 30 for the Tanana Valley, and near zero for the Brooks Range, and 5 to 10 below up along the Arctic coast, upper 20s for the Pribilofs, above freezing for the Aleutians. Highs tomorrow, single numbers, 0 to 10 for the highs, Arctic coast and the North Slope. Much milder, jumping into the mid-30s south of the mountains. Again, 45 to 55 in the central and eastern interior, 45 to 52 for the Susitna Valley, and the Panhandle, upper 40s to lower 50s, 40s for the Alaska Peninsula, near 40 for the Aleutians. Lows the following morning, a little chillier here, especially on the eastern Arctic coast, down to possibly 15 below, and mid-20s to lower 30s central interior, and lower to mid-30s, 30 to 35 southern Alaska, upper 30s for the Panhandle. Highs in the afternoon, 45 to 50 for the southeast coast, maybe a little cooler in the Tanana Valley there, 50 to 55 or so. 45 to 55 south central Alaska, and either side of zero on the Arctic coast. Otherwise, out to the west, your upper 30s at Chimia, lower 40s for Adak and Atka, near 40 for the Pribilofs, and upper 20s there for St. Lawrence Island.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Looks like tomorrow morning, quite an area IFR here over the southwest interior. Back to the coast, marginal from there all the way across the Bering into the Aleutians. Some areas of IFR here, Bering Strait, St. Lawrence Island, Seward Peninsula, then VFR into the Chukchi Sea. And for the eastern North Slope, actually most of the North Slope, Brooks Range on out to the Arctic coast, IFR, some VFR in the central interior, mixed conditions on down to the North Gulf Coast, and a lot of IFR over the Panhandle. And that dissipates here over the southern areas and holds there from, looks like Stevens Passage, Wrangell, Petersburg on up along the North Gulf Coast here, possibly to Valdez and marginal VFR Copper River Basin. Now it's marginal over the southwest interior, and that IFR is really dissipated, but hanging on to the Yukon Delta coast and St. Lawrence Island, and then a patch up there just north of the eastern Brooks Range. And for Tuesday morning, back into a more widespread IFR condition up there, and then marginal and then more IFR here to the west and southwest. But then down over the Bering Sea and Aleutians, nothing but marginal VFR. And then some VFR showing up there around the Bristol Bay, Togiak Bay areas, and otherwise marginal Kodiak, Cook Inlet, marginal VFR, IFR here up along the southern slopes of the central Alaska Range, eastern slopes of the western mountains, and North Gulf Coast into the northern Panhandle, and then down the border. And for the afternoon, that improves a little bit, lose most of the IFR, but staying marginal over the southeast coast. And a narrow swath of VFR, looks like from the 40-mile country into the mid-Tanana Valley, and IFR along and just south of the Brooks Range, as looks like moisture is pushing up to the north. VFR, central western Arctic coast, maybe, Bristol Bay, VFR, otherwise everywhere else, marginal to some patchy IFR here over the central Aleutians. And passes Anatuvik, IFR to start, becoming marginal into the afternoon, and a slow improvement also for Adigan, IFR gradually becoming marginal. And Lake Clark and Merrill, looks like VFR, optimistically, be some clouds around, but of the VFR variety, same forecast for rainy. And windy, VFR, and Isabel starting out marginal, gradually becoming VFR, a slow improvement throughout the afternoon. And for the let's see, Mintasta, VFR in northern entrance, and then VFR slowly, possibly becoming marginal as some moisture moves in from the south. And Tanita, VFR becoming marginal. Looks like a pretty good bet that'll become marginal in the afternoon. And Portage, marginal VFR, possible IFR at times on the eastern approach. And for Chilkoot and White, IFR the entire day. Freezing level, not much to look at here. 2,000 feet up over the Kenai Peninsula, Kodiak into the eastern Norton Sound area, and then at the surface here near the Pribilofs, and then kind of meanders into the southwest interior, following north of the coastline here, and then back down across the northern Panhandle. Icing, kind of a zone here from Dixon Entrance right up across the southeast coast, along the North Gulf Coast, down to Kodiak Island, back up along and inland, from the coastline inland here a little bit, all the way up to the Seward Peninsula. This area through here gets pretty iffy, but there's just a slight chance, better chance here for the North Gulf Coast and the Panhandle, and also some isolated moderate icing threats out for the Alaska Peninsula eastern Aleutians. Jet stream, main jet well to the south, starting to show a little bit of a weakening, not the high speeds except, well, 150 knots here, and of course 190 knots back toward Japan. Otherwise, kind of a lighter wind flow with several upper level lows here across the Bering Sea and the Aleutians into the Gulf of Alaska. Polar vortex up there just off the Arctic coast, and moving on to 9,000 feet, we've got southwest flow into the Panhandle continuing 25 to 30 knots. This low kicks the winds up along the North Gulf Coast here, about 30 knots, 9,000 feet. High pressure over the interior, 10 to 15. 25 knot winds with this low off the eastern Beaufort Sea coast. couple of lows make for a light, very light wind, weak lows, light wind condition, 5 to 10 knots here for the Bering Sea, 25 for St. Lawrence Island, and 3,000 feet, a couple of low centers, again weak, light winds over the interior, 25 knots along the North Gulf Coast, otherwise light winds out to the west, 25 knots here up over the western Arctic coast and western Brooks Range, and 15 to 20, maybe 25 for the Panhandle. Turbulence, areas of light to isolated moderate chop, Port Alexander up to Elfin Cove, North Gulf Coast, and up over the extreme western North Slope here, and some light to isolated moderate chop into the central Brooks Range. After the break, I'll be back with a look at the sea ice conditions and marine forecasts.
Good evening, and thanks for joining us for another edition of Alaska Weather Facts. I'm meteorologist Dave Snider, joined again by Eric Stevens of GINA, the Geographic Information Network of Alaska from the University of Alaska Fairbanks. And Eric, thanks so much for joining us again tonight.
Happy to be here, Dave.
Thanks, Eric. And we've been talking about the complex gathering of information from satellites, looking down on the surface of the planet, and some of those orbits around the planet work for Alaska, and some of them don't. There's a lot of challenges with those. How can we get better imagery for the poles and specifically for Alaska?
Right. Well, today we're going to talk about a very interesting kind of satellite orbit that has potential to be real helpful for the high latitudes.
Okay.
Especially us here in Alaska. Canadians, Russians, Norwegians will all be interested in this. The satellites are not in orbit yet. Now the future is uncertain, but it's possible, and if this happens, it will be wonderful for Alaska. Okay. It's called the highly elliptical orbit.
Oh, that sounds
it's interesting. Yeah. And I think first, to help our discussion, we should get back to some of Kepler's laws and how do satellites work.
Sure.
Kepler's first law, an orbit of a planet around a sun or a weather satellite around the Earth is not necessarily a circle, it's an ellipse.
Okay.
And the highly elliptical orbit takes advantage of this aspect. We're going to put the Earth in one of the ellipse and then stretch one of the foci of the ellipse and then stretch that ellipse out real far to make it highly elliptical.
And the foci is that bend part of the end of the ellipse. If you're going to stretch out a rubber band, that would be the center, kind of the stretchy part.
Yes.
Ends. Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
And then Kepler's second law says that the closer something is to the thing that it's orbiting, the faster it goes.
Okay.
We see this in the solar system, that Mercury flies around the sun real fast. Jupiter, much slower. Jupiter's further away, it's slower. Mercury's closer in, it's faster. This happens with weather satellites too. Even satellites like the International Space Station, it's pretty close to the Earth. It goes around the Earth in only 90 minutes. That thing is moving. It's only 250 miles away. So how can we take advantage of these two aspects of Kepler's laws of motion to get better weather surveillance of Alaska? And this highly elliptical orbit is going to be the approach. So we have with us today our friendly planet Earth and our simulated satellite, the lid off of this salt shaker
like
here.
Sputnik there. Yeah.
There it is. It's shiny, it's metal, it's space worthy. And what we want to be able to do is, could you have a satellite hover over the top of the world, up over Alaska? You can't really do that. Geostationary satellites have to be over the equator.
Okay.
So how could we almost solve this? And this is the tricky part. Maybe should we tilt the Earth over?
Focus on the pole. That's what we're trying to accomplish here, right?
So here we have the northern side of the planet, and we're going to trace out the orbit of a satellite with this salt shaker lid here. Now imagine a highly elliptical orbit. So let's put the Earth in one of the foci of the ellipse, and we'll have an imaginary foci out here. So the satellite will not go in a circle around the Earth, but will be in this long strung out ellipse. So the satellite will go...
Kind of like a racetrack.
Yes, there you go, like a racetrack. So it's an oval elliptical shape like that. And notice now that when the satellite's over here, we've got a nice view of the northern hemisphere around. There's Alaska, Russia, Canada, Greenland, all there. So that's the ellipse aspect of an orbit, Kepler's first law. The second law saying that when you're further away as a satellite, you go slower. And this we can take real advantage of. Because the way this orbit works, when the satellite goes over Antarctica here, it's going to be close to the Earth. It's going to be moving, whoosh, goes on by. And then as it comes out here, it will slow down. This increases what is known as the dwell time. The satellite will just hang here looking for hours at Alaska.
Wow.
and the high Arctic. And then eventually it will come around and it will accelerate and whiz around the South Pole and then come back and hang here for a while because it's further away from the planet. It goes slower.
Yeah.
It has to. That's the laws of motion. And such like that, repeating.
Wow.
Now, the real important way to make this work is you have to have two satellites. So that
Okay.
while one is whipping around the pole, you've got the other one out here, and they work as a team. You could then get a series of images of Alaska that can be almost from a a constant frame of reference.
Right.
And you can loop them together to make movies. You can take a picture every 10 minutes, say, of Alaska, and then loop it, playing it at several frames a second. You could see the clouds whiz on by. You know, the Weather Channel, weather broadcasters in the lower 48 especially can show these movie loops from the geostationary satellites. In Alaska, we've never really been able to do that very well, especially in the higher, most northern parts of the state, because those geostationary satellites are over the equator. It's not a good view. And this highly elliptical orbit whipping around the South Pole and then dwelling up here would be a way for us to get that constant frame of reference and do really good weather surveillance over the Arctic, seeing where those storms are, where they're going. Nothing quite like a movie loop of the weather in time to really illustrate what's important, what's going on.
And compared to what we have right now, we just have small windows or snapshots of what's going on with the polar orbiters. We don't have that long range view that's looking top down to give us that complete motion picture that helps us understand so much of the atmosphere at this
There's
point.
so many different kinds of satellites. Each has their advantage. Each is important, and the highly elliptical orbit satellite will also fit into that scheme. It's a nifty idea to solve an Alaskan challenge.
That's fantastic. Well, that sounds really exciting. And again, kind of a satellite dream of the future to come. Okay, very good. Thanks for joining us today, Eric. We really appreciate the information. And if you'd like to learn more about what Eric does at Dehne, at the University of Alaska Fairbanks, we invite you to visit the web address that you see on your screen there. For Alaska Weather Facts, I'm meteorologist Dave Snider.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Welcome back. Today's sea ice analysis. Not a lot of difference. Actually, this zone right through actually retreated back a little bit from what it was yesterday, while ice increased and formed in Norton Sound as well as along the Yukon and Kuskokwim Delta coast on down to the bay there, and also increasing here over the Chukchi Sea. And those northerly winds are going to be coming down. So the whatever is coming southward won't be coming southward as fast as it was. And that'll be probably after tomorrow and into Tuesday. And for the southeast coast here, along the coast, south to southwest, 20 to 25, south 25, and then gales developing tomorrow along the extreme north coast there at 35 knots out of the southeast. Small craft advisories for the inside waters here, south 25 Clarence Strait, southeast 25 for Stevens Passage, and then back around to the south for Lynn Canal with those seas 5 to 6 feet. And for Tuesday, southeast 25 Clarence Strait, lighter winds up here to the north with southeast to 20 for Stevens Passage and 20 knots for, Lynn Canal. North coast, east-southeast 30 knots with 12-foot seas, and the south coast, south to southeast at 25 with 12-foot seas. Prince William Sound, northeast 25 tomorrow. Small craft advisories there. We've got minimum gales here, eastern North Gulf Coast with 35 knot winds, and then northeast 25 from the west side across the Barrens. Much lighter winds though when you get into Kamishak Bay, just 10 knots. Cook Inlet, north to northeast, 15 to 20 knots. And then for Tuesday, light northerlies here for Cook Inlet at 10, southeast 15 for Kamishak Bay. Winds come down, stay east and come down to 20 knots for the Barren Islands, northeast 25, western North Gulf Coast, and the Middleton Island zone east at 30. Prince William Sound, east 15 with 3-foot seas. And for Shelikof Strait tomorrow, we've got southwest winds at 15, but small craft advisories here in these eastern zones there for Kodiak, and then back to 20 knots from the southwest of Sitkinak. Alaska Peninsula, southeast 15 to 20, not too bad, and light winds for Bristol Bay. Outlook for Tuesday, winds stay light here for Bristol Bay and just 1-foot seas in the forecast. Southwest 20 here on the Pacific side of the peninsula. Bering Sea side, southeast to 20. Pretty light winds on up to Sitkinak, southwest at 10. Light southwesterlies also for Shelikof Strait, and now north 15 there, east side of Kodiak. Fox Islands tomorrow, kind of a variable wind pattern here. South west to southeast, but only 15 knots south of the islands, northeast 15 to 20 there north of the islands. And for the central Aleutians, north to northwest at 15, pretty light, and then northeast, north to northeast 15, Adak and Atka, northeast 10 to 15 out west. And pretty light winds continue into Tuesday out here in the west, east northeast of 15 until you get to Adak, and then only 20 knots from the southeast. A little brisker across the Fox Islands with small craft advisories out 25 knots south-southeast and seas as high as 12 feet. Southwest coast, light winds tomorrow, northeast at 10, coming down, diminishing winds, southeast 10 for the Pribilofs, northeast 20 St. Matthew Island, and small craft advisories to St. Lawrence Island for 30-knot northeasterlies. Swinging around and much lighter, especially at Norton Sound on Tuesday, 15 knots for St. Lawrence Island, variable 15 here for the southwest coast, east 20 for the Pribilofs, and up along the Beaufort Sea, east side, west at 10, north at 10, turn northeast at 10 there for the central coast. And then we get into some more interesting wind here from about Point Lay, brisk wind advisories all the way down to Wales for those 25 to 30 knot winds. And then for Tuesday, a decrease here, northeast 20 for the Chukchi Sea from Cape Thompson up to roughly Point Lay. It'll be east-northeast at 30, and then east 15 for the central coast, northeast 15 on the east side. Looking at tonight's weather again, front brings more precipitation on of a light variety into the northern and central panhandle, and some of that extends back to the west here along the North Gulf Coast to possibly Kodiak. This trough keeps it unsettled here in the west, and the wind advisory continues out for the Kobuk Valley north of Ambler, and pretty windy conditions continue also here for the northwest coast, and no wind and areas of fog, maybe a flurry or two for the Arctic coast. Weak front brings moisture into the eastern Aleutians, and that makes a pretty good jog to the northeast on Monday. And then for Tuesday, rain in the panhandle, not too bad over interior Alaska, generally light winds and mild temperatures.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.